Podcast.ph can be downloaded for free on iTunes by typing Podcast.ph programs. You can also listen on Podomatic, Spreaker, Stitcher, Clamor, YouTube, and our official URL, Podcast.ph. Like and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google+. Podcast.ph, the most active and fastest growing podcast network in the Philippines.
The class divisions in our society, income distribution is so bad. And you have policies that benefit management and not workers. And I think these are the sort of the core issues.
Welcome to Bonfire Discussions here on Podcast.ph. In Bonfire Discussions, we talk to bright, maverick, and interesting personalities in our society, and those who we think should be given proper social TV exposure because of the good work they have done and issues or conversations they have ignited. Ako po si Martin Andanar. Our guest today is Dr. Walden Bello. He was the representative of AKBAYAN Citizens Action Party, the party list, the House of Representatives. He resigned on March 19, 2015. He is also a board member of the Focus on the Global South, Bangkok, Thailand. Also adjunct professor at the State University of New York at Binghamton. Kala ko Birmingham. Distinguished visiting professor at St. Mary's University of Halifax, Canada. Professor of Sociology Department, University of the Philippines from 1994 to 2009. And he also went to University of California at Berkeley. And he just finished his fellowship at the University of Wisconsin at the United States of America. He took up his master's and PhD at Princeton University, not Wharton. Welcome to the show, Congressman Dr. Bello.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Martin. Happy to be here.
Of course. You are running for senator, and let's just go straight to the point. Why are you running for senate?
Well, the short answer is that I was drafted by a broad network of civil society groups and some party list groups to run for the post. I was not expecting to do this kasi naman you know that I resigned last March, as you said. And I had my plans to do research and writing on the global economic crisis, particularly yung role ng China in the global economy. But there was this draft that pushed me to run, and I finally made the decision around October 12th, the week of the filing of candidacy, that if the people drafting me said that they were willing to go all the way 24/7 for this campaign, challenge ko sila, then I'm willing to do it. Kasi this campaign is not about me, this campaign is about you. Okay? Basically, the advocacies of the people who are who've been pushing me to run. So that's I think the short answer. And I do have a program, and we can go through the various points of that program.
Of course.
But beyond the program, I think what people are looking for is high ethical standards, and so that's the reason that I'm running.
You mentioned the high ethical standards. So when you look at the ethical triangle in governance, what do you consider yourself? A politician, a policymaker that would go for principle-based policies, or would it be a consequence-based or virtue? How would you solve a problem?
People are tired of programs in the sense that anybody can formulate a program and can be this and can be that. Programs are important, but more important than that is what you stand for in terms of principles. And what led me to resign from Congress was that I could no longer support a president that practiced double standards. Now, on the one hand, good governance raw, daang matuwid, but you go after your enemies with daang matuwid, but you protect your cronies. And I said, this is not acceptable. And unfortunately, my party, AKBAYAN, continued to support the president, but I could no longer do that. So I think the only principled thing to do was to resign. And that's what I did. And I think it goes back to one's relationship to power.
Yes.
I would say I'm very, very wary about power. I don't like it, but it's something that's there in order to get things done. In answer to your question, that's the basis of my running at this point, because my sense is that if you're going to push agrarian reform, for instance, if you're going to push security or tenure for workers, if you're going to push for an independent foreign policy, independent of both China and the United States, if you're going to fight for our OFWs, okay, what is most important there is character to push it through. And I think our people, to a large extent, want to see people who stand up for what they believe in, rather than get seduced by interests and by power. I think people see that I stand for. I mean, I feel a bit uncomfortable talking this way because it seems like mga holier than thou, but I think people really are looking for ethics in politics at this point in time.
We need that. We need that so much. Do you see our society still in a class conflict until now?
The class divisions in our society, the income distribution is so bad. And you have policies that benefit management and not workers. And I think these are the sort of the core issues. People see that these are neglected, or if they vote people into office that then go back on their promises, I think they become very, very cynical and skeptical.
Yes.
And this is when the authoritarian temptation is very strong, because people who get disappointed so often in people who run on democratic programs, when they do not deliver but instead use their time in office to promote themselves, the level of frustration builds up, and then when a strongman character comes along,
like Duterte,
they get seduced by the illusion that you need shortcuts to be able to get things done. So, pero the point is that when they get very disappointed and frustrated, can go in very anti-democratic directions. So I think this is why democracy is very fragile. And I think it's very important that leaders in democracy must always embody high ethical standards and push their programs because the alternative would be worse. So, I mean, he's not exactly one of my heroes, but Winston Churchill, said that democracy is a bad form of government, but it is better than all the alternatives. So, this is something that we must always be reminded of, and it's very important always to have a democratic reawakening in the country. Because if you take democracy, civil rights, human rights for granted, then one day you'll wake up without those.
If you are a utilitarian, that means you can also be good. Ganun pala. So you can either be, if you're a populist, you can either be good or bad.
Yes.
Yeah, and what is happening right now, it's turning out to be bad in this government.
Yes, I again, to be really fair, in 2010, I supported our party's support for the president. And I must say that for the first 3 years, there were initiatives like the Reproductive Health Bill and other things, including the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, including the fact that there was a promise to push agrarian reform. This was something that I thought was opening a new way. But after these 2013 elections, things began to go bad. And the biggest thing was the disappointment for me was the administration's involvement in the disbursement acceleration program, the DAP, no? Which was a very big scandalous use, surreptitious use of people's money. And it basically a slush fund that was used for very political purposes, nepotistic purposes by the administration. And, I still believed in the president at that point. And I said, you've got to get rid of these people who created this fund. And that's when, basically, instead of getting rid of a person like Mr. Abad, he, in fact, defended and protected him. And that's when I said, double standards. We cannot allow double standards because it will erode the credibility of the administration. And maybe Mr. Aquino, because of the Aquino name, might not suffer because of it. Nevertheless, credibility is very important. And credibility lies in consistency in principle. So, ito yung, going back to your point, yes, there's good pro-people policies. But sometimes one administration that comes with pro-people policies and maybe after some good things it has done, it can also go off the rails. This is why I come back to the point. This is why I resigned, because I saw it had gone off the rails.
So there's no compromise for Walden Bello. There's no compromise in a way, in a sense that, okay, ito, Walden, binigyan na namin sa inyo yung RH. Baka naman, ito hindi. There's no compromise.
Well, compromise, there's principled compromises and unprincipled ones. An unprincipled compromise would be something that says basically...
DAP.
DAP, no? I mean, come on, if you say... we'll go after the enemies of the administration using good governance, but we will protect our people. Unprincipled yan, compromise na yan. No? But if it's a question of, say, a program that's very important, but you don't have the money at this point to do it, can you wait 1 or 2 years, then we'll really fund the program? Okay naman yan. No? But that's a principled compromise.
Okay. Meron bang mga policies and government na nagkasundo kayo ng simbahan?
Yes, definitely. I mean, yung social justice. I think nakikita naman natin ngayon that Pope Francis is very much an embodiment of a church that cares, that is concerned about inequalities, no? And see, Pope Francis, after so many years, I think you finally have a pope that is concerned about social justice as articulated dun sa liberation theology in the 1970s and 80s. So, I think on that score, I take my hat off to him. That that this is something. In fact, yung mga statements niya are quite critical of capitalism, of unbridled profit making, of finance capital, of the way that capitalism is ruining the planet. So I think that those are things that I would very much support in terms of the stance of key people within the church like si Pope Francis. So, pero meron rin mga areas na mukha yatang we have differences, fundamental differences, and the whole area of gender rights, women's reproductive rights, and the ability of women to be able to control their bodies, and the ability of families to be able to limit their families using contraceptives. Well, I think we should just acknowledge that I and the church have very great differences here. And I think it's a great thing that the reproductive rights bill was passed, and that we won that. And I think that might be a lesson to the church that not to put up doctrinaire, fanatical opposition to things that are really needed by society. Because it will just end up eroding the influence of the church.
Do you think we need divorce in this country?
Of course, that's overdue, and I think I believe one of the 2 states in the world that does not have divorce. The other one is the Vatican. So, but this is something that's already accepted because people are human beings. They make choices that they think in the fervor of romance and love. They think it's, this is for life that you're going to be partners, and you end up with a very messy situation. And no matter how much they try to stick together, they realize that it's bringing about unhappiness. So, responsible divorce, a law that is able to protect, especially the women, protects their rights. A divorce law like that is very much needed by the country at this point in time. So, one of my platforms is to push a divorce law.
You mentioned capitalism earlier. How do you suggest this country move forward in terms of the economy? What policies, what structure would you push once you make it in your Senate bid?
Well, let me just put it this way. See, in the U.S. at this point, one of the leading candidates for the Democratic Party is Bernie Sanders, who is a declared socialist. And when he's asked what his idea of socialism is, he's basically saying that it's a society in which you have a concerted effort to reduce inequality, to limit the concentration of wealth, to have the government be able to recycle resources to raise the interests of the people, where you have strong controls over banks so that they don't rip off people. And we have a strong regulatory controls over the private sector so that they don't create catastrophes like climate change. So, in that sense, a broad sense, you have more and more popular control of the economy in order to bring about the greater good rather than unbridled profit making. I think that's the sort of direction that we really need to be able to get to. The socialism, for me, is not central planning kasi maraming mabubulya sa central planning, but more economic democracy. That's really what we're talking about. And there's a role for the market, definitely. But we also need to make sure that the market does not go off the rails. And here, you do need government regulation, but you also need to govern the regulators. So civil society should also have very strong controls over both government and the economic agents like the private sector. So, ang tingin ko, ang solution dito is more and more role of civil society in disciplining both the market and the state. So this is where I would say this is the direction where the world is headed at this point. And the climate crisis is bringing us to this realization that we really need more effective democratic control of both the state and of corporations and economic enterprises.
How do we entrust our future to civil society when our civil society is not as united as they should be?
I think that disagreements, debate is part of democracy. But precisely, I think our faith in the democratic method is such that we also know that the exchange and debate and exchange of ideas is the way to create consensus. So there's no way we can get around it, no? Kasi discourse is part of what society is about, but discourse and debate is also the way that we can arrive at unified positions.
So you're saying that there should always be a conversation between the state, the society,
Yes.
and the
Yeah,
and the
that
business sector.
yes, that's now when we say business sector, I'm thinking that you can have different mga economic agents. You could have small businesses. You could have medium and small enterprises. You could have cooperatives. You could have state enterprises. You could have worker management enterprises. No? So may malaking variety yan. No?
Business
That,
sector,
you know,
yeah.
so that when we talk about the economic sector, we have a diversity of economic actors. No? Now, one of the things, though, that I think we should be very wary about, and we should have very strong controls over, are transnational corporations. Kasi transnational corporations, precisely because of their size and the interest that they serve, which is foreign transnational interests, oftentimes do not have the national interest in mind. No? So this is why I would say na yung recent Supreme Court decision outlawing use or the production of genetically modified products here in the country, I think is a great step forward, because I think it is a responsible way by which we're protecting the public health from these risks that are posed by genetic engineering. Why are all these corporations that are interested in pushing genetically modified food here in this country and genetically modified production and field trials? I think it's not because of the interest of our people, but it's the interest of profit of these transnational corporations. So, ang sense ko is that we must put the interests of our people and put the interests of our enterprises ahead of transnational enterprises.
We're going to take a short break. We have about 4 more questions left for Dr. Walden Bello, and one of which you already mentioned. He did mention about the environment and what his advocacy is with regard to our environment and how we should maintain it, etc. Especially the use of fossil fuels. We'll be right back here in Bonfire Discussions on podcast.ph.
I am not seduced by power. I have said no to power when I resigned. I do believe, not because of myself, that the only people that you can trust with power is those that hate power. I think that's the reason why I think people should vote for me.